Hi again, everybody, and welcome back to Enjoy English. I'm Bruce.
大家好，我是 Bernice。
Today is day 2. We have been talking about making motion pictures, often called movies these days, and the development of the sounds in movies. And you're probably wondering, what? The first movies had no sound, and therefore were called silent movies. It was a whole generation or two. This was what we call the turn of the century, from the 1900s to the 2000s. During that period and for another 2 or 3 decades into the century that we live in now, sound started to become an important part of movies. After no sound at all, sounds were eventually introduced, and that's what we talked about all day in our last lesson. Today we're going to continue talking about this, what we consider today a necessary part of storytelling once you are in the movie theater.
对，所以刚才 Bruce 老师就介绍说呢，从以前无声到现在开始有声的这些电影，所以声音呢，它确实扮演了相当重要的一个部分。这个虽然说我也没看过无声电影啦哈。好，那这边我们也讲到，刚才有一个很重要的这个人物呢，就是这个拟音师的这样的一个角色。所以呢，他们都有一对呢，这个对于声音相当敏锐的耳朵，就是因为他们有这一双耳朵，才可以在后制的时候把这些声音再加入到我们看的电影里面。
Foley, the creation of sounds in films. Although modern movie editors can use software to create and edit sounds, they still face challenges when it comes to certain sounds. That is why Foley artists remain an important part of the film industry. They come up with many creative ways to use everyday objects to produce the sounds that we hear in films. For example, breaking a celery stick can create a sound that is similar to a bone breaking. One of the most common tasks for Foley artists is creating the sound of footsteps. Because these sounds are difficult to capture during filming, Foley artists typically have to recreate them for each character in a film. They might wear specific types of shoes and walk on different surfaces to match the scene. Foley artists are also responsible for recreating the sounds of movements, such as a flag being blown by the wind, or people brushing past each other in a crowded place. Even for small actions like these, they need different materials to get the desired result. Foley artists play a big role in the film industry by producing the important sounds that bring movies to life. They must be creative, which earns them the title of artists. Without them, the rich sounds we enjoy in movies would not be possible.
Okay, let's look at our text, T-E-X-T. Let's look at the words that go with this storytelling, telling about the story of the development of movies, especially the sound dimension or the sound part of movies. Movies didn't always have sound. Okay, first paragraph here. Although modern movie editors can use software to create and edit sounds, they still face challenges when it comes to certain sounds. And we mentioned this yesterday. If you had a violent movie and the police are fighting with the robbers, and you see a robber hold his gun at the policeman and then pull, but you don't hear the shot until 2 seconds later. Very unsatisfying. So the development was not only important, but it was handled very, very well. We introduced the king of sound production at the end of our lesson yesterday, and his techniques are still being used today. So again, this sentence, although modern movie editors can use software to create and edit sounds, they still face challenges when it comes to certain sounds. What this means is the original movies might have the sound of a gun. It was a real sound of a real gun and then added into the film at just the perfect time. Nowadays, we don't need the gun. We can create the artificial sound, the man-made sound.
人工的。
The sound of the gun can be produced and then added into the movie, and no one had a gun to fire.
好的，所以他的一开始就讲说，尽管虽然呢，现代的这些电影的这些 editors， 就是这些所谓的剪辑师啦，他们可以使用软体啊，软体就可以去创造出来这些，或者是编辑出来他们要的这些声音了。那可是呢，他们就是讲这些所谓的这个电影的剪辑师们，他们依旧呢还是面临到一些挑战。这些挑战呢，就是对于呢 when it comes to， 当我们一说到，记得这个 to 是介系词，所以它后面要加的是名词，就是当一说到呢某些声音，其实对于这些所谓的剪辑师来说，还是挺困难的，面临到一些挑战。
This phrase, when it comes to, it can be very, very useful. When we are talking about a particular subject or part of a subject, when it comes to that topic, 怎么样? So you might want to remember this phrase. When it comes to something, it depends on it or it came from it. You're dealing with it when you write about it or talk about it.
所以这个片语老师刚刚讲了，它非常好用，非常的实用。就是当我们要讨论到某一个主题的时候，我们就可以说，when it comes to swimming， 好，当我们讨论到游泳这件事情，然后后面发生一件事情，这样。
Okay, next sentence. That is why Foley artists remain an important part of the film industry. Two things we should note here. One is that some of the techniques that Foley developed over his many decades of work in the industry are still being used today. He was the creator in the sense of what we consider modern sound production in movies. And to say that it's an important part of the film industry is not strong enough. I would like to see a crowd of teenagers go to a movie and it's a silent movie, but they didn't know it. I would wonder what their reaction would be.
Run away. 所以老师说，他如果想象就是有一群青少年出来进去电影院，怎么一点声音都没有？那我就说他们应该跑掉了吧，对不对？或者他们会 be very angry. Hey, where's the sound? 声音呢？声音怎么不见了？发生什么事情了？所以如果在现代这个时代，如果叫你看，就是我们讲的没有声音的电影，应该没有人会接受得了啦。所以这边这个句子就讲了，那就是为什么这些所谓的拟音师呢，他们到现在 remain 依旧仍然的在这个所谓的电影产业里面是非常重要的一员。
So going back to Foley's time and when they accepted what he was doing, because it worked and it made movies far more interesting and intense and so on, these other editors and Foley, they came up with many creative ways to use everyday objects to produce the sounds that we hear in films. Now, much of this might be a little dated because computers today can create sounds that we know and sounds, for example, in a science fiction picture or a monster picture, sounds that nobody ever heard before. Anything you can think of and things maybe that you don't even think of first, but you develop later. This is the power of the sound part of the movie industry as it is today. And they may even use very simple, common things, but no one thought, that sound reminds me of something else, and they can play with that sound and then create the sound of a spaceship, or aliens, people or beings on other planets when they talk to each other. They can imagine what it might sound like and look like and so on. So it's a really creative part of the movie industry.
没错，所以呢，这一些这个拟音师呢，他们呀就会想出来 come up with。想出来很多很多这些有创意的一些方法。那为什么要想出这么多有创意的方法呢？就是他们想说，哎，我看可不可以利用一些 everyday 这两个字要放在一起哦，才是形容词。你分开的话变成副词了啊。所以这个 everyday 是形容后面那个 objects， 就是我们利用一些每天我们所看到的一些物品。好，这些物品呢，哎，是不是就可以制造出一些我们可以在电影里面听到的声音？但是这些人必须要非常的有创意啊，否则我怎么知道 monsters 怎么叫的？到底是啊还是啊？我都不晓得，对不对？所以我要怎么样用这些日常物品，然后就可以打造出这些我们平常在电影里面就听到的声音。
The last sentence, I think, is a good example of some of the creativity in this industry. For example, breaking a celery stick, celery,
青菜.
青菜 has a very clear and special
clear
sound.
Yeah.
And for some people, that could represent the sound of someone jumping down out of a tree and breaking their
bones.
Their bone, their leg bone. So even if it sounds a little bit like something that we do hear or have heard, it may be applied in a situation that we would never think of putting the two things together.
Yeah.
A celery stick is something to eat at dinner, and jumping out of a tree requires a fool and a distance out of the tree to the ground. Putting these two together is an act of creativity.
Yes.
All right, this is the example. For example, breaking a celery stick can create a sound that is similar to a bone breaking.
好，所以呢，这一边呢就讲到一个很不错的一个举例了。他说，假设呢，他们利用这种所谓折断一根芹菜，大家都吃过芹菜，很脆的一种蔬果蔬食。这个东西呢，它是一个 stick， 做成一根棒子这样子，长长的。那你把它折断。这个时候呢，没想到呢，竟然折断一根这个芹菜的棒子呢，哎，就可以创造出类似 similar to， 就是跟什么东西很像，就是我们的骨头 get 断掉的这个声音。好，所以呢，我如果没有骨头没断过，我们也不知道它到底是什么声音嘛。我们没想到竟然呢，就用芹菜啊把它折断，就可以创造出这样的一种声音。所以你看他们的创意力是非常十足的。
One of the most common tasks for Foley artists is creating the sound of footsteps. First, however, I want to mention Foley artists. Notice that Foley is Jack Foley's family name, but here it's Xiaoxie. We're not talking about him, we're talking about something that he produced and is now referred to with his name, because anyone in sound production, especially in the movies, knows who Jack Foley. I don't know if he's still alive now. I doubt it. But his whole technique, his whole concept of sound, is the foundation of what we do today. In whether we use computers or not. The concepts of producing sound and matching them to the motion picture industry, the moving picture industry, is so important and was so long that his techniques, they can call them, that's a Foley technique that we are still using, but Xiaoxie的 F, because now it's in common usage.
对，老师在解释为什么这个 Foley 的 F 没有大写的原因，就是因为 Jack Foley，当然那个 Foley 是他的姓氏，所以才要大写。可是因为他已经创造一个 foundation， 就是他已经建立出这样的一个基础了，所以我们就沿用 Foley 这个字，变成现在的这样的拟声的一个拟声师的这个称谓。那这时候你就不需要大写了。所以其中呢，他就讲到有一个最常见这些拟音师最常见其中的一个 tasks。记得前面是 one of， 所以你的 task 这个名词要加 s， 很多同学都会忘记到这样的一个小小的一个点。所以呢，这些拟音师呢，他有很多任务，但是里面有一个最常见的任务呢，就是他要创造出这个人走路的脚步声音。
Because these sounds are difficult to capture during filming, Foley artists typically have to recreate them for each character in a film. Tall guys who are heavy, and children and women in high heels on a sidewalk. Those are all footsteps, but they are very, very different in their actual sound. So to capture, to reproduce, you are presenting the idea of a sound is being produced not in its original form, but in a way so close to the original that you actually think you're listening to a woman in high heels on a city street, rather than a reproduction of that sound.
没错，所以呢，这个第二个句子他就讲了，因为呢，这些声音，哪些声音？就是刚才讲这个 footsteps。这个所谓的脚步声这些脚步声的声音呢，实在是太难收录到了。比如说，就像老师刚才讲，你如果是个子比较高，或你比较胖的这个走路的声音，跟女生穿着高跟鞋咔咔咔咔咔的声音，这都是非常的不一样的。所以你要怎么样 capture during filming， 就是刚好我在拍这个拍摄的过程之中，刚好可以收录到捕捉到这样的声音，实在是有一点难。所以呢，这些拟音师呢，就必须要再重新的去制作这样的一个脚步的声音，然后呢，是每一个角色的声音，他都要重新制作，因为每一个人的身形还有他的这一个穿的鞋子都不一样，所以你不可能他穿着球鞋，然后有咳咳咳咳的声音，这就非常的奇怪了。所以这一点确实对他们来说呢，是相当这个困难的收录的一种声音。
Okay, the last sentence in this paragraph. They might wear specific types of shoes and walk on different surfaces to match the scene. So if we have robbers, thieves at night, they are walking in a neighborhood, they're not going to wear formal leather shoes. They're going to wear sneakers.
Yeah.
And you will have to reproduce that sound rather than the sound of a thief in high heels.
No.
That won't work. So that they have to think about it beforehand and study it, and then try to create the sound that they want, or they know what sound they want, but how to recreate it, how to make it sound real.
所以呢，他们要怎么去做到这件事情呢？所以这些拟音师可能他们自个儿呢得先穿上 specific， 就是特定的。比如说，就像刚刚老师讲，你是 robbers， 你是 thieves， 你偷偷到人家家里面，不可能，这就人家说有小偷，人家就听到你的声音了。所以这时候呢，他们就要穿上这样的所谓特定形式的这些鞋子，然后他们要开始走来走去走在哪里呢？走在一些不同的 surfaces， 一些地面上面，比如说这是泥巴地啦，还是这一个比较硬的地板啦，还是怎么样？他们要去走在这些不同的地面上的目的是去干嘛呢？为了要 match the scene。我们知道这个 scene 呢，就是电影里面一幕一幕的场景。就是这个场景里面，他们穿的这个鞋子，走在这样的一个地面上面，应该出现什么样的声音，他们就要去模拟创造出来。
And if it sounds easy to you, consider this fairly frequent scene. Let's say at an airport, suddenly there's shots being fired, and the next thing are all the people trying to run away to safety. Well, they're not all. They wouldn't all be wearing sneakers,
No.
and they wouldn't all be 6 foot, 200-pound men. So you have to think ahead about how many people would be wearing what kind of shoes, and the detail, the reproduction of reality in sound, to me, is amazing. It's an art form.
对，所以老师讲，这确实是一个艺术的形式，就是想象如果在这个飞机上面有人这个要叫 hijack， 那的时候呢，那大家就很多的鞋子在那边跑来跑去，这些你都要创造出来这个声音。
Foley artists are also responsible for recreating the sounds of movements, such as a flag being blown by the wind, or people brushing past each other in a crowded place. This is the detail that Foley began to reproduce, and people thought, well, that really improves what we see because what we hear matches so well that it adds to our understanding of what we're looking at. And here again, we see the phrase Foley artist to honor the man who really got sound moving and introduced into modern day movies. These guys and gals are also responsible for recreating the sounds of movements, not just people walking on different surfaces, but a flag blowing in the wind does make a sound that we call a flap, F-L-A-P, a flapping sound.
Okay.
And when you hear that, you know, you start looking for a flag if it's done well, or people brushing past each other in a crowded place.
Brush.
And these days, what place isn't crowded? So people rub up or brush up against each other. They're not hitting each other, but it's a sound we expect to hear. And in a well-reproduced sound environmental movie, you can hear that kind of sound too.
所以呢，这一段马上就讲出来，这些拟音师呢，除了刚才他们要自己去模拟出这些声音之外呢，他们同时呢也负责要去这个重新的制作一些这个所谓的动作上面产生的声音。什么样的动作呢？他就举例了，比如说第一个，我们可能听到那个旗子啊，这样子啪啪啪，这样被这个风，老师刚才说的叫 flap。这样的一个声音，这个旗呢被风吹动的这样的一个声音，或者呢是在一些 crowded place， 就是很多人，比如说捷运站里面啦，或者是 night markets 里面啦，很多的人，那每一个人都这个肩膀跟肩膀的就这样子 brush， 这边的 brush 就是指大家会碰到彼此的肩膀会互相的摩擦这样的一个动作。那这个时候呢 past 就是当你呢从旁边很快的这样走过去的时候，在拥挤的场所人们擦肩而过的这些声音，这些拟音师通通都要负责。
Even for small actions like these, they need different materials to get the desired result. They have to study, for example, at the airport, was it winter or summer? Because the shoes or clothing that they wear or brush up against each other make different sounds. And they want as realistic sounds as they can possibly produce to get the desired result. They're trying to fool the audience, basically, is what they're trying to do, but they want to do it so well, the audience doesn't realize that they're being fooled. So if you want something that is a desired result, it's expected, preferred, or simply wanted. Audiences actually want to escape reality, and the best way to do that is to give them realistic sounds, but they're sitting in a chair in a movie theater, so they're living two worlds at the same time.
对，所以老师这边讲到这个声音的重要，就是呢，你虽然人坐在电影院的这个椅子上面看着电影，但是好像把你利用声音把你带到了另外一个场景里面去的那个感觉。所以呢，这些拟音声呢，即使像这样的一些小我们刚刚讲这些动作，什么这个风吹动这个旗帜或者拥挤的场所人们擦肩而过的这些声音，即使是这样的小动作，但是呢，也是需要这些不同的利用一些不同的这些材料，你利用的这些材料呢，你才可以得到你的 desired， 你所想要、你所预期的这种 result， 这个效果才能出现。
Yeah, or desired, exactly, or expected. So if somebody drops a glass, we expect to hear a glass breaking.
对。
Okay, we'll take a short break before we continue and finish today's lesson.
All right.
Okay, let's finish up day 2 of our 2-day lesson. Foley artists play a big role in the film industry by producing the important sounds that bring movies to life. We've been talking about that both yesterday and up till now today. They must be creative, which earns them the title of artists. They come up with solutions. Gee, we've got a person jumping out of an airplane before the parachute opens. What will it sound like? A body dropping through air that is maybe colder and stronger than, of course, inside the cabin of an airplane. Is the person screaming because they're afraid, or is this for sport? All these details to have a good effect on the audience have to be as close to reality as possible.
对，所以刚才老师的意思就是说呢，你在制作这些声音的时候，你要尽量的跟真实的场景发生的那个动作是一样的，然后你要去怎么样掌握住这些细节呢？所以这些拟音师他们扮演相当重要的一个角色，尤其是在这样的一个电影的产业里面。怎么样的重要呢？他们借由 by， 所以后面要接 ing， 借由制作这些很重要的声音，而且这些声音是多么的重要 ，that bring movies to life。你可以把这个电影整个让我们感觉它好像赋予它生命力的感觉。哇，我真的感觉这个人从上面跳下来，然后呢，这个降落伞打开来，等等等的这些声音。就是因为这些拟音是透过这些制作的这些技巧，才能够让我们觉得电影这么好看。
They, the Foley artists, must be creative. What does something sound like? There's not an immediate answer to this. You have to explore the possibilities, which earns them the title of artists, because artists have to pay very careful attention to every detail, whether they are painting, playing music, singing, designing, and so on. They have to go into a world that is not there. They create that world, creative people. We call artists.
对，所以呢，这些拟音师啊，他们必须要怎么样？相当的这个有创意啊，因为有创意的话呢，这样的一个状况呢，才让 which 就指前面这样的一个这么样有创意的这一群拟音师呢，让他们 earn 了，得到了，获得了这样的一种称号。什么样的称号？他们就是艺术家。
Without them, the Foley artists, the rich sounds we enjoy in movies would not be possible. What can you say? Just imagine, in 1 century, in 100 years, movies have changed from being basically a series of photographs with someone playing a piano, a real piano in a real studio. There was no sound in the movie, but music was played to try to match what was going on in the visual part of cinema. 30, 40 years later, we get the first sounds. A few decades after that, we get the first color. 3D movies were popular for a while, not too long ago. But I can expect, anyway, that there will still be future changes that will amaze audiences and how creative people can be.
没错，所以呢，这边的最后一句就是说，如果没有这些所谓的拟音师的话呢，这样子一种丰富的 rich， 这么丰富的这些声音，我们所 enjoy， 我们在电影院里面所能够享受到的这一些所谓的声音呢，就根本是怎么样不可能的啊 ，not be possible， 就是 impossible 的意思嘛，就是不可能的意思。所以呢，这些拟音师的角色之所以这么样的重要，就是他们利用这些声音，把电影的深度好跟它的这个有趣性。整个都增加起来的，所以我们刚刚说它是 improve 嘛，甚至它可以让我们这些 audiences 都可以 immerse 在里面，沉浸在里面，说哦，这个电影好好看哦，或者哎呦，这个电影好可怕，就是因为它创造出来的这些声音，所以可以让你整个人沉浸在这一些所谓的 on-screen world，对不对？这种荧幕上的世界。
Okay, hope you now can enjoy even more the next movies that you see when you realize how much work and how much forethought, how much planning and preparing for movies. It is really as much technology as it is an art. And that's all I have to say on the subject.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, and tune in whenever you want to enjoy learning some English with us and others here on this program. Until we meet again, bye-bye.